May 5th, 1961.
So this was a very significant flight because the country needed this. The whole free world needed this flight at this time.
A Mercury Redstone rocket, MR-3, known as Freedom 7, lifted off from Launch Complex 5-6 at 9:34 a.m. Eastern Time. It was the first manned flight controlled by teams inside the MCC, and it lasted 15 minutes.
It was a beautiful, beautiful May morning. And I was in charge also of the telephone, the intercom service for the control center. And I was also in charge of the air-to-ground. So I had a fairly busy time during all of the launches, but obviously there was an air of excitement in the control center on that first manned flight that you couldn't duplicate anywhere in the world.
That very first flight on that Mercury Redstone, I mean, going up into space and coming back down, even though you didn't orbit the Earth, that set the stage for everything else that we've done.
As the command center, the MCC had 8 primary functions: to direct all aspects of the capsule's flight, monitor the health of the astronaut and the system status of the capsule, make decisions to abort a mission, determine the proper procedures following an abort procedure, command the re-entry of the capsule, keep the astronauts and all the tracking stations informed of the mission's progress, coordinate and maintain the flow of communication between all tracking stations, and inform the recovery forces when the capsule would re-enter the atmosphere. It would take 14 flight controllers to meet these mission objectives. The first critical row of flight control seats was coined the trench. One of those important positions was the capsule communicator, or CAPCOM position, one held only by an astronaut.
I think the Capcom today is very much the same as it was back during the early Mercury days. It's that point of contact with the crew. It provides the crew perspective to the control team. Yeah, very similar.
Public interest in the space program and the astronauts grew as Project Mercury realized much success.
Because the beaches were loaded, the program was pretty small. It was only about 350, 400 people. And it was real excitement. The cities around here were growing. The center was really on its way.
News of the Mercury missions was in the newspapers and on TV.
I've had the pleasure of covering every launch of American astronauts from Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Shorty Powers was the first public information officer for NASA. He was the voice of mission control.
We had a red light that would come on our desk, and that red light was a signal that Mercury Control would have a report in 30 seconds.
Some employees at the Cape were just as excited about the astronauts and the missions as the public.
I met all of the original 7 astronauts because they would come into the ready room. Well, they were excited like everyone else, and everything was new to them. And they would all come through because each one was interested, of course. It wouldn't just one come through, they all would come through.
The Mercury Atlas and Mercury Redstone vehicles flew 26 missions as part of Project Mercury. 6 of those were manned flights. The first orbital flight for the Mercury program was MA-6.
Your backup clock is started.
Astronaut John Glenn performed it on February 20th, 1962. Astronaut Scott Carpenter followed Glenn's successful mission with his own orbit of the Earth later that year.
Climbing into that spacecraft and sitting on the top of the rocket was something we had simulated time and time again. So, in a certain sense, it was just another day at the office. Except this time, you realized that it was for real.
MA-9 was the last flight of Project Mercury, piloted by Gordon Cooper on May 15, 1963, in his spacecraft named Faith 7. He was the last American to orbit the Earth solo. The mission lasted 1 day, 10 hours, 19 minutes, and 49 seconds.
I named my spacecraft Space 7 for 3 reasons. 1, because of the belief in God and country. 2, because of the loyalty to organizations. The 2 organizations actually, which I belong. And 3, because of the confidence in the entire space team.
The Mercury program was ending, and America's second human spaceflight program was soon to begin in support of one very clear mission.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Bridging the gap between Mercury and Apollo was the Gemini program. Following the Mercury program, Gemini subjected astronauts to long-duration flights in support of the upcoming Apollo moon missions. Gemini accomplished 10 manned missions and 2 unmanned, each on a Titan II launch vehicle from Launch Complex 19. 2 astronauts flew in the capsule, which is how it got its moniker, Gemini, or Twin. Renovations to the MCC were completed in 1962 and in 1963 in support of the Gemini missions. An addition wrapped around the east, north, and most of the west and south sides of the MCC. New areas included space for flight control briefings, data analysis, and room for a new Gemini spacecraft trainer. The old trend charts on either side of the world map were replaced by rear projection screens. The world map displayed new tracking stations, and one clock above the map changed to estimated liftoff time. A desk for a public affairs officer was also added, along with a pair of consoles on the left side of the room facing inward for the support control coordinator and the display coordinator. After the conclusion of Gus Grissom and John Young's flight of Gemini 3 in March 1965, NASA transferred mission control to Houston, Texas, where it still resides today. After mission control functions were relocated to Houston, Texas, the Mercury Control Center provided backup for the initial launch and the trajectory for the remaining Gemini missions. In 1967, the MCC became a tour stop for guests visiting NASA's Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. A bus tour provided the public an opportunity to look through the glass windows of the viewing room and see where the first chapters of American space history were written. It was a popular attraction from 1967 through 1995. In the late 90s, the building began to show signs of aging. In an effort to preserve what remained inside the deteriorating structure, NASA removed the artifacts inside. Later, a plan was developed to create an authentic MCC flight control room exhibit at the KSC Visitor Complex.
The opportunity for relocating this amazing room full of history was to offer it to many, many more people. Accessibility to the actual facility was becoming more and more challenging, and it allowed for the consoles throughout the room to be displayed and preserved. Had they been left in the building all those years, they would be in terrible condition right now.
The exhibit is inside an 8,500 square foot building dedicated to early space exploration.
One piece at a time, we carefully removed it, brought it over. So what you see here is a duplication of the actual MCC, the Mission Control Center, with the screens, the consoles, the flooring, the finishes, and of course the tracking board. The consoles themselves, though, are completely authentic. The tracking map is completely authentic.
Guests get a memorable and authentic experience.
I think it's an amazing opportunity for our guests to look through the glass and step back in time and honor the heroic first years of our space program.
The MCC was designated by the National Park Service as a contributing structure to a National Historic Landmark District in 1984. The district consists of 7 other contributing properties, Launch complexes 5, 6, 13, 14, 19, 26, and 34. NASA determined the Mercury Control Center was no longer needed for NASA missions and had deteriorated beyond repair. Final artifact preservation efforts began in 2009. The Mercury Control Center controlled the flights of 3 vehicles from 3 launch pads during its years of service. In March 2010, heavy equipment operated by NASA contractors leveled the concrete block and metal building.
Yeah, it's a transition, but we have to be energy efficient. We have to prepare for the future. We got to prepare for going beyond low Earth orbit and doing bigger and better things. And this is all part of the process as we grow and change here at the Kennedy Space Center. We will never forget our heritage. It's crucial to us. History is important.